This is a fictional story, created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, names, places, or events is purely coincidental. My sister destroyed my childhood. Not satisfied with that, she then destroyed my marriage by sleeping with my husband. You know that thing where you grow up thinking your family is just a little weird, and then one day you realize, no, this is actually messed up on a professional level? That was my childhood. And for the longest time, I honestly thought I was the problem for not being more grateful about it. I am Rain, by the way. And if you were sitting on my couch right now with a mug of something warm, I would probably start this the exact same way. Because there is no cute or smart way to ease into the fact that my own sister spent years trying to ruin my life and then eventually slept with my husband. I wish I was exaggerating. I really do. When we were kids, the house pretty much revolved around my little sister and what she wanted, what she liked, what she felt like eating, what show she wanted on the living room screen. My father cooked for her, cleaned up after her, checked her homework for her, drove her to every practice and school thing, and acted like she was made out of glass and sunshine. With me, he just kind of tossed responsibility at me and called it independence. By the time I was in middle school, he was already telling me I needed to be the mature one, the understanding one, the one who helped my sister with her assignments, while she rolled her eyes at me and called me boring behind his back. I wore glasses, read all the time, and liked quiet. She was loud, dramatic, and had this weird talent for turning on a sweet little angel voice whenever an adult was in the room. The second they turned away, her whole face changed. It started small, like her borrowing my stuff and breaking it or losing it, and then telling my father she had asked and I had said yes. Every time I tried to explain, he would say I was being selfish and that big sisters were supposed to share. When she realized she could get away with basically anything as long as she smiled at him later, she pushed it more and more. She read my journal once and then stood in the kitchen reciting parts of it to my father like it was stand-up comedy, and he laughed so hard he had tears in his eyes while I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. When I told him it was a violation of privacy, he said sisters did that kind of thing all the time, and I should not be so dramatic. I still remember the look my sister gave me over his shoulder, that little smirk that said, "See, no one is ever going to believe you." By the time we hit high school, it was not just stealing my things and invading my privacy anymore. She started doing these little sabotage games that were not technically violent, but could have gone very wrong. She dropped tiny pebbles into my cereal once, and then watched me almost chip a tooth. And when I shouted, she insisted it was a prank and that I needed to relax. My father told me I had no sense of humor. She accidentally knocked my glasses off the sink twice, both times right before big exams, and I had to go to school with old lenses that gave me a headache so bad I could barely see the board. She thought it was hilarious. When I stopped telling my father about it because I was tired of being called oversensitive, she took that as a green light. Of course she did. At school, she was somehow on the side of every girl who decided I was an easy target. She would sit with them, laugh when they made jokes about me, and sometimes quietly add her own little comments because she knew they would never repeat that part back to teachers. She had this mask she wore for adults, all politeness and soft smiles. And then there was this other version of her who mimed slitting her throat at me from across the cafeteria, while everyone else thought she was just stretching her neck. One night, after a really bad week where my grades were slipping and I was barely sleeping, she cornered me in the hallway, looked me dead in the eyes, and told me maybe everyone's life would be easier if I just did not wake up one morning. Just like that. Then she skipped away to go watch a movie with my father. I wish I could tell you I marched into the living room and told him word for word what she said, but I did not. I knew how it would go. He would say she did not mean it, that I was twisting her words, that maybe she was just frustrated, that sister said awful things sometimes. My mother was barely home back then, working late shifts and extra hours, dragging herself through the door after dark with deep lines around her mouth and just enough energy to heat something up and fall asleep in front of the television. She did not see most of it. All she saw was a tired older daughter who seemed moody, and a younger one who could flip on the charm and talk about school like she was the main character in a feel-good movie. The worst part is that I started believing maybe I was the drama. Maybe if I were prettier or funnier or less serious, my sister would like me. Maybe if I did not flinch every time she walked into a room, my father would not get irritated and accuse me of provoking her. I tried shrinking myself so she would have less to aim at, but somehow it only made me easier to hit. There is nothing quite like being outnumbered in your own house, where even the walls feel like they are tired of hearing you complain. The first time things actually crossed into something that could have ruined my life in 1 second, it was over something stupid like a hair straightener. My sister and I were in high school by then, and she had gotten obsessed with styling tools and makeup tutorials she watched on a random video site. I was in my room reading when I smelled something weird, a sharp chemical smell mixed with smoke. I thought something was burning in the kitchen and got up to check, but before I could reach the door, she came up behind me in the hallway with this cheap lighter she had taken from somewhere. She held it way too close to the back of my head as a joke, flicking it on and off and laughing about how frizzy my hair would look if she actually did it. I jerked away and told her to stop, obviously, and she just stepped closer. I could feel the heat grazing the ends of my hair, and my chest tightened so hard my vision blurred. My father from the living room shouted for us to calm down and stop screaming, because in his head it was just another argument. I remember saying her name over and over, my voice getting higher, and her smiling like this was the funniest thing she had done all week. Then, out of nowhere, my mother's voice cut through the hallway, sharper than I had ever heard it. She had come home early from work because a meeting was canceled, and she walked right into the scene of her younger daughter playing with fire inches from my head. Everything froze. My sister's smile dropped, the lighter went out, and my mother practically flew between us. She snatched the lighter out of my sister's hand and told her in this cold, controlled tone that if she ever pulled something like that again, she would be calling the police, and they could explain to an officer why they thought arson was funny. My sister started crying instantly, big dramatic sobs, and my father came rushing in to comfort her like she was the victim. My mother told him to be quiet. I had never seen him speechless around her before. That night, after my sister was sent to her room, my mother sat with me at the kitchen table. She covered my hand with hers and asked me, very quietly, how long this had been going on. I did not even know where to start. I told her about the journal, the cereal, the glasses, the hallway comments, the way my sister played sweet with adults, and something else entirely, when it was just us. My mother's face went from pale to furious to something like heartbreak. She admitted she had a feeling something was off, but every time she tried to say anything, my father brushed it off and told her she was tired, or that she did not understand how sisters acted these days. She believed him for a long time because she wanted to, because the idea that one of your kids is terrorizing the other under your nose is a hard thing to swallow. She apologized to me, and I cried harder at that than I had during the whole lighter thing. It was the first time in my life I felt like an adult in the house was actually choosing my reality over my sister's version. My mother did not magically become perfect overnight, but she changed that day. She put her foot down more. She stopped letting my father be the only one to decide what was a big deal and what was not. She threatened to pull my sister out of activities if there was even a hint of more pranks. She even scheduled a meeting with the school and demanded they keep an eye on the bullying situation. It was like she woke up and realized she had two daughters, not just one shiny favorite and one inconvenient extra. Around that time, she also signed me up for self-defense classes at a community center. At first, I thought it was just about the fire thing, like she wanted me to learn how to get away if somebody cornered me, but it became so much more than that. I went twice a week, then 3 times. Then I started going early to help the coach set up, because for the first time in my life, I felt strong in a place where my sister did not exist. My body changed slowly. I stood straighter. I looked people in the eye more. I started to believe I could take up space without apologizing for it. Wild concept, I know. My sister hated it. She could not stand that I had something that did not revolve around her. She started making little digs about how I was trying to be tough, how it was cute that I thought I could fight. I ignored her as best I could, but she was committed to getting a reaction. The breaking point came when she stole the envelope of cash I had been saving for months by doing tiny paid chores for neighbors, helping in a local store on weekends, and tutoring a kid from my math class. It was not some huge amount, but to me it was proof I could build something for myself without depending on anyone. I discovered it was gone when I went to move the envelope from a drawer to my backpack so I could go deposit it, and there was just empty space where it had been. I knew instantly who had taken it. My father would never look in my room, my mother respected my things, and my sister had a long history of thinking my stuff was actually her stuff with extra steps. I felt this cold anger in my chest that was different from the usual panic. I waited. I sat in the living room with my shoes on until I heard her coming down the stairs, laughing into her phone about some plan with friends. She walked toward the door in this bright outfit, bag on her shoulder, like she had not just robbed me. I stepped in front of the door and said her name. She rolled her eyes and told me to move because she was going to be late. I asked her where my money was. She played dumb at first, obviously, then said something about how maybe I should not leave cash lying around if I cared about it so much. I told her I wanted it back. She said, "Or what?" With that smile I had seen 1,000 times. The thing is, by then I was not the same kid she used to trap in corners. When she tried to push past me with her shoulder, I grabbed her wrists and stepped into her space, the way my coach had taught me. I did not hurt her, but I held her exactly where she was, and she did not expect that. Her balance went off, and she landed on the floor, more from surprise than force. She started screaming like I had thrown her down the stairs. My father came running in and immediately pulled me back, shouting my name like I was some stranger who had broken into the house. He demanded to know what was going on, and my sister clung to his arm, telling him I had attacked her out of nowhere. I told him about the money. He frowned, but before he could launch into his usual speech, my mother walked in from the kitchen and said she had seen my sister counting an envelope that morning and bragging on the phone about having extra cash for her night out. My sister froze. My mother told her to go upstairs, bring the envelope back exactly as it was, and hand it to me in front of both of them. For the first time, my sister looked genuinely scared of an adult in that house. She stomped upstairs, came back with the money, and slapped it into my hand like she was the victim. My mother looked at my father and said if there was one more thing stolen, broken on purpose, or joked about with fire, she would be calling the authorities herself. My father muttered something about overreacting but did not push it as hard as usual, because deep down even he had to know this was not normal. It was the closest thing to a win I had ever had in that house. After that, my sister backed off physically. She stopped getting that close to me, she stopped touching my things as often. But the emotional stuff, the cold shoulder, the pointed little comments, the way she would talk to my father about me like I was not in the room, that did not go anywhere. She just shifted tactics. She started ignoring me in this huge, obvious way, only asking me to pass things at the table through him, refusing to look at me when we were in the same room. My father would tell me to be the bigger person, to be patient, to understand that she was going through a phase, which was hilarious considering the phase had apparently started when she learned to walk. By the time I got to my last year of high school, the only thing I could think about was leaving. I worked my butt off, stayed up late studying, joined a couple of clubs, and basically lived in the library. I did it partly because I liked learning. Sure, but also because the idea of staying in that house after graduation made my chest hurt. The day I got the letter saying I had been accepted into a university with a scholarship that covered tuition, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my eyes were swollen. Not because I was sad, but because it felt like someone had opened a window in a room I did not realize had been suffocating me. My mother was thrilled. She planned a little gathering in our cramped living room with a store-bought cake and a paper banner that said congratulations in big letters. My father actually looked proud in a real way, not that forced awkward smile he usually gave me when relatives asked how I was doing. Even he could not argue with a scholarship. My sister, who was 6 years younger and still working her way through high school, barely looked up from her phone. When my mother tried to include her, she shrugged and said something about how some people just liked school more than others. Leaving for college felt like stepping into another dimension. I moved into a tiny dorm room with a roommate who had her own weird family drama, and we bonded over that in the first week. For the first time, the fights at home were background noise instead of my entire reality. I could choose whether or not to answer calls. I could keep my stuff where I wanted without worrying it would mysteriously wander off. I could sit in a quiet study lounge for hours and not have anyone accuse me of being antisocial or too serious. I inhaled that freedom like oxygen. College was not perfect, obviously. I still had social anxiety. I still flinched inside whenever I heard someone raise their voice, and I still walked on eggshells during breaks when I had to go back home. But in that new environment, I slowly built something like a life. I made friends who saw me as more than the older sister who complains too much. I picked a major that actually matched what I was good at instead of what would impress people at holiday dinners. I got a part-time job on campus that paid minimum wage, but felt like independence in a way no allowance ever had. It was not glamorous, but it was mine. In my second year, a mutual friend dragged me to a party off campus that I did not want to go to. It was one of those crowded apartment things where the music is too loud and the kitchen is full of people who all know each other from some club you never joined. I was standing by the sink, holding a cup of something I did not even like, planning my exit, when a guy offered me a plate of pizza and told me my bored face was stressing him out. I should have been annoyed, but I laughed instead. He was awkward in a kind of endearing way, making fun of himself as much as he teased me, and he did not try to push past my boundaries when I made it clear I was not there for anything more than conversation. We ended up talking for hours in a corner of the living room, yelling over the music. He asked about my classes, my job, my family, in a casual way that did not feel like prying. I told him more than I meant to, honestly, because there is something about talking to someone who does not know your history that makes honesty feel safer. He told me about his own background, which had its own set of messes, but there was this steady streak in him that I found comforting. We exchanged numbers at the end of the night almost as an afterthought, but I checked my phone every hour the next day anyway. I know. You can probably guess how this part goes. We started seeing each other more, meeting for cheap coffee between classes, studying in the library, walking back to our dorms together. It was not some explosive movie romance. It was slow and kind of clumsy and real. He showed up when he said he would. He listened. He did not make me feel stupid for needing reassurance. When I finally told him about my sister in a more detailed way, he did not say any of the things I was used to hearing, like, "Are you sure it was that bad?" Or, "Maybe she was just jealous." He just shook his head and said, "That sounds exhausting," in this quiet voice that made my throat tight. I brought him home for the holidays once we had been together long enough that it felt serious. I was nervous, obviously. My family had never seen me in a relationship before, and I did not know how my father would act, or what my sister would do with the extra attention. He joked about it on the drive there, telling me he would be on his best behavior, and that if he said anything weird, I could blame it on nerves. I was the nervous one, though. My palms were sweating so much on the steering wheel that I had to wipe them on my jeans at every red light. My mother, bless her, was thrilled. She hugged him like she had known him for years and told him he was welcome anytime. My father was polite, but reserved, which was honestly better than I expected. My sister, though, flipped a switch I had not seen in a while. She turned on the charmer mode, laughing at every joke he made, asking him a million questions about his program, his hobbies, his favorite shows. She pulled out the whole, "I am just a sweet younger sister" act, like she was auditioning for a part. She did little things that technically could be brushed off, like touching his arm when she walked past him in the kitchen, leaning a little too close when she showed him something on her phone, making side comments to me later about how he is cute in this mocking tone. I felt that old familiar knot forming in my stomach, the one that said, "You are being pushed aside again." But every time I tried to name it, my brain would shame me into backing off. I told myself I was just insecure because of our history. I told myself she had no real power over my life anymore. I told myself he would never, ever see her the way he saw me. I did not want to be the jealous girlfriend accusing her partner of things he had not done, especially in front of my own family. So I swallowed it. I let the little comments and casual touches slide, as long as he never did anything that crossed an obvious line. A few months later, after we went back to campus and got swallowed by exams and work schedules again, life slipped into this routine that felt almost normal. We studied, we hung out with friends, we fought sometimes about stupid things like who forgot to answer a message or who was supposed to grab milk on the way back. It was ordinary. I convinced myself the holiday weirdness was a blip, a product of old scars and too much nostalgia. Then I found out I was pregnant. It was not part of the plan, if I am being honest. We were both still in school, juggling classes and jobs and loans. I stared at the test in my tiny bathroom while my heart pounded in my ears. And for a full 5 minutes, I literally could not move. When I finally told him, I braced for the worst, but he did not bolt. He sat down on my bed, stared at the floor for a long time, and then said, "We would figure it out." My upbringing had been full of unspoken rules about what was acceptable, especially when it came to sex and marriage and babies, so telling my parents was its own special nightmare. My mother cried, because of course she did, but she hugged me and said we would make it work. My father went quiet in that scary way where you know he is about to lecture you for an hour, but even he had to accept that the situation was what it was. We ended up getting married not long after graduation in a small ceremony. Nothing fancy, just family and a couple of friends. My sister did not even bother to hide her boredom. She went on some trip with friends right after and missed half the baby stuff, which I told myself was a blessing. Less time for her to poke at the cracks. Our daughter was born healthy and loud and perfect. Holding her, I thought, this is it. This is my chance to do motherhood differently. I swore to myself I would never make her feel like she was competing for my love. I wanted to break the pattern so badly I could taste it. For a while, it looked like maybe I would. The early years of marriage were rough but manageable. We were broke, tired, and constantly negotiating whose turn it was to get up at 3 a.m. But we were in it together, or at least it felt that way. He got a decent job first, full-time with benefits, while I pieced together hours at a local office and took on freelance work at night. We argued about money a lot, about the time we did or did not have for each other, about my family and their constant low-grade drama. But he still held my hand when we fell asleep. He still laughed with me when our daughter did something ridiculous. I clung to that. And then, because apparently stability makes some people itchy, he cheated. I did not find out because of some dramatic lipstick stain or mysterious perfume. I found out because he got sloppy with his phone. One night, he fell asleep on the couch with his messages open, and a notification popped up from a number I did not recognize. I was not even trying to snoop. I leaned over to take the device out of his hand so it would not fall, and there it was, a whole thread of messages that made my stomach flip. It was a long back and forth with someone from work, and it had been going on for months. There were photos, plans, little I love yous that had nothing to do with me. I remember reading them with this weird numbness, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. When I woke him up and showed him, he went through this whole dramatic cycle. First he denied it, said it was just flirting, said it was not physical. When I scrolled up and read out loud the very clear proof that he was lying, he broke down crying, saying he was ashamed, that he did not know why he did it, that it was a phase. He promised he would cut her off. He promised he would do anything. Therapy, church, whatever I wanted. It was like watching a toddler caught with their hand in the cookie jar, except the cookie was my entire sense of safety. I would love to tell you I kicked him out that night and never looked back. I did not. We separated for a bit. He moved in with a friend, and I tried to see what my life would look like without him in it. But every time I looked at our daughter, I just saw another little girl growing up in a broken house. I remembered what it was like to feel like my parents' issues were pulling the floor out from under me, and I panicked. He came crawling back with flowers and apologies and a willingness to go to counseling, and I let him. Yes, I know. You do not have to say it. For a while after that, he actually seemed to change. He came home on time. He went with me to sessions, even when they got uncomfortable. He did small things like leaving notes on the fridge, bringing home my favorite snacks when we could afford it, listening when I spiraled about trust. I never fully stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, but I pushed the fear down far enough that I could function. Our daughter got older, started school, and life settled into this almost peaceful rhythm, the kind where nothing huge happens, but you also do not feel like you are constantly fighting to breathe. Years passed like that. We paid bills, juggled schedules, went to school concerts where the sound system never worked right. We argued and made up and argued again. The big betrayal became something we did not talk about much, just a scar under the surface. I know some people are probably screaming at me through the screen right now, but when you are in it, when you have a kid and a mortgage and this whole web of shared stuff, walking away is not just packing a bag and slamming a door. It is dismantling your whole life. I was not ready to do that. Not yet. Then little things started shifting again. He got a promotion that required more travel. At least, that is what he said. He started taking trips to the same city over and over, always for some conference or training or meeting that never had a clear name. He would be gone a few days at a time, come back tired and extra affectionate in that performative way that set off alarm bells in my head. He guarded his phone more, turning it face down on the table, taking it with him even to the bathroom like someone was going to steal his entire identity in the 30 seconds he was gone. I tried to tell myself I was paranoid, that this was the old wound talking, but then I found receipts. Literal receipts. One day when I was cleaning out his bag before a trip, I found crumpled slips of paper from a hotel and a restaurant in that same city he always went to. They were for 2 people. It was subtle, but it was there. 2 meals, 2 drinks, 2 guests listed, a room charged for multiple nights. When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said he had to take a client out for dinner, that the hotel put extras on the bill all the time. The way he said it was so casual it almost worked, but something in his eyes did not match. I started keeping track without telling him. Dates, places, excuses. I checked the calendar on the wall and wrote tiny marks only I understood. Once, when he left his email open on the family computer for half a second, I saw a confirmation message for a reservation for 2 in that same city, at the same hotel, overlapping perfectly with one of his so-called conferences. When I confronted him with that, he turned it around on me so fast my head spun. He told me I was spying. He told me I was obsessed with catching him, that I was the one ruining our marriage this time. He brought up his past affair like it was a weapon I had been holding over his head, like I was the one who would not let it go, not the one who had been stabbed by it. Every time I tried to have a calm conversation, he would twist something. If I cried, he called me manipulative. If I stayed composed, he accused me of not caring. If I suggested couples counseling again, he said therapy had clearly not fixed anything the first time. So what was the point? He told me I needed help for my trust issues. I started feeling like I was losing my mind. I would stare at myself in the bathroom mirror, asking out loud if I was making things up. That is what emotional manipulation does to you. It turns your own brain into a courtroom where you are both the only witness and the one on trial. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday night, because of course it did. I found another hotel charge on our joint account from the same city, overlapping with a trip where he'd told me he was staying with colleagues to save money. There was no way to explain it away this time. When he walked through the door that night, pulling his suitcase behind him and smiling like everything was fine, I felt something snap inside me that did not feel like anger at first. It felt like clarity. I waited until our daughter was in her room with headphones on, watching a show on her tablet, and then I put the printed statement on the kitchen table. He glanced at it, then at me, and I saw the moment he realized there was no easy lie that would close this. At first, he tried anyway, muttering about billing mistakes, shared rooms, how I did not understand how corporate stuff worked. I just stared at him and said his first name once, very quietly, in a way that told him I was done being played stupid. He dropped the act. It was almost frightening how fast he shifted. His shoulders sagged. He let out a long breath, and then he said, "Fine. Yes. I have been seeing someone." Just like that. No build-up, no pretense. My chest burned. I asked him who. He looked at the wall behind me and said it did not matter, that what mattered was we were not happy and he had made mistakes. That word again. Mistakes. Like he had spilled coffee on my favorite shirt. Not detonated the foundation of my life. I kept asking. I did not raise my voice, which I think scared him more. I just kept repeating the question. Who? After a while, he got irritated, like I was being unreasonable for wanting an actual answer. He threw out generic lines about someone who understood him, someone who did not nag, someone who did not hold his past over his head. I told him I deserved to know who had been in my place while I was at home taking care of everything, and that is when he went for the jugular. He said, "How do I even know she is mine?" Meaning our daughter. He looked me dead in the eyes and said that. For a second, I did not even understand the sentence. My brain could not compute that someone who had cheated on me multiple times, who had lied and manipulated and gaslit me for years, was now implying I had been unfaithful. I laughed. I actually laughed, this sharp, ugly sound, and asked him if he was serious. He doubled down. He said maybe we should do a test just to make sure, since I seemed so obsessed with the truth. I am not proud of what I did next, but I am not ashamed either. I threw the nearest thing, which happened to be a dish towel. It bounced off his chest, completely harmless, but the motion let out some of the energy buzzing under my skin. I told him he was cruel. He said I was hysterical. Classic. I asked him again who she was. He kept dodging. I told him if he did not tell me, I would hire someone to find out, and then I would take every piece of proof I found to court, to his job, to anyone who needed to see it. That got his attention. He stared at me for a long time, like he was weighing whether I was serious. Then he said a first name that made my entire world tilt. He said my sister's name. For a second, everything went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The way a room feels after the power goes out and you realize you can hear your own heartbeat. I actually said "what" out loud, like I had misheard him. He repeated it. He said he had been seeing my sister. Not some stranger from work, not a neighbor. My sister. The girl who told me to disappear when we were teenagers. The girl who ruined every safe space I tried to build in that house. The girl who laughed at my trauma and called it a joke. I sat down because my legs just decided they were done. I wanted to believe he was lying, that he was saying the worst thing he could think of to hurt me because he knew my history with her. But then he started talking, really talking, and the details came out in this horrible, messy string. He said it had started years ago, during one of our holiday visits when we brought our daughter to see my parents. Our daughter was already old enough to run around the house and tell long stories about school back then, and my sister was in her early 20s, living away for college most of the year. That detail matters because I refuse to let anyone twist this into anything other than what it was. Two adults making ugly choices behind my back. He said my sister had been flirty, that she had sent him messages on a social media app after we left, that she had added him to group chats and then started private ones. He tried to frame it like she had chased him, like he was just this poor, confused man who stumbled into something he did not fully understand. I knew better. He was a grown adult who made deliberate choices. But I also knew my sister. I knew exactly how she would have played it. He talked about how she had complained to him about feeling misunderstood, about how she made jokes about our childhood that framed her as the victim, about how she said I was too rigid and judgmental to ever really get her. He said she told him he was the only one who saw the real her. I almost threw up. That line was so familiar it hurt. It was the same script she had used on teachers, relatives, anyone she needed to pull into her little orbit. They met up in that city where she had gone to college. Every time he told me he had a conference there, he was actually meeting her. They would stay in some mid-range hotel, eat at anonymous restaurants, pretend they were this little secret couple. He said that had been going on for 3 years, maybe longer. He said he was not even sure, or maybe he just did not want to say the exact number out loud. 3 years of trips that were not really trips. 3 years of lies while I packed his lunch for the airport. They kept it going for years, weaving it into the fabric of my life so thoroughly that looking back, I can see all the places I should have noticed but did not. The trips that did not add up. The holidays where she seemed extra smug. The way she stayed just a little too long in the kitchen with him when we visited my parents. All the puzzle pieces were suddenly on the table, and they built a picture I never wanted to see. I asked him how he could sit across from me at dinner knowing he had spent the afternoon in a hotel bed with my sister. He did not have a good answer. He muttered something about not wanting to blow up the family, about being weak, about getting stuck in something he did not know how to end. He tried to pin most of it on her, saying she threatened to tell me if he broke it off, that she played on his guilt. I am sure she did all of that. I also know he had a mouth and 2 working legs and could have walked away at any point. He did not. He liked having both. Stability at home, excitement on the side. Classic story. I do not remember everything I said after that. Things blurred. I know my voice got louder. I know I cried and laughed and said some things I had been swallowing for years, about feeling alone even in my own marriage, about how his first affair had cracked something in me that never fully healed. I know our daughter came into the kitchen once, wide-eyed, and I forced myself to calm down long enough to tell her we were just having a grown-up argument and that she did not do anything wrong. Then I packed a bag. I grabbed enough clothes for a few days. My toothbrush, the folder with our important documents, and my daughter's favorite stuffed animal. He followed me down the hall asking where I was going, like it was not obvious. I told him I was not sure yet, but I was not sleeping under the same roof as him that night. He tried to block the door, then stepped aside when I looked him in the eye. That look must have told him everything he needed to know about how done I was. I drove to a cheap hotel on the edge of town, the kind with questionable carpets and a flickering sign, and checked in with shaking hands. My daughter curled up on one of the beds, clutching her stuffed animal, looking at me with this quiet confusion that broke my heart. I told her we were having a little adventure, that we would talk more tomorrow, that she was safe. After she fell asleep, I sat in the bathroom with the shower running so she would not hear me sob. The next morning, after about 3 hours of actual sleep, I called my mother. I did not know exactly how that conversation was going to go. My father had been worshiping my sister for so long that I could easily imagine him accusing me of lying or overreacting. But I also remembered the day with the lighter, the way my mother's face had changed when she realized how bad things really were. I hung on to that version of her as the phone rang. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. I told her I needed to talk in private. She must have heard something in my tone, because she went quiet for a second, and then said she would call me back from the car. When she did, I told her everything. Not in some calm, organized way. It came out in bursts, with me going back to fill in details I had skipped, crying in between sentences. She did not interrupt, not once. She just listened. When I said my sister's name in connection with my husband, my mother let out this sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a curse. She asked me to repeat it like she could not quite believe her ears. I did. Then there was this long silence where I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, she said, very quietly, "Come over today, please." I told her I was not bringing my daughter into that house until I knew exactly what kind of war I was walking into. She understood. She said to come alone first. Driving to my parents' place without my child in the back seat felt wrong, but I did it anyway. When I got there, my mother was already waiting for me at the door, her face pale but set. My father was in the living room, confused, remote in hand, muttering about the game he had been watching until my mother turned off the screen and told him to sit down. That got his attention. She never turned off the screen during his games. I sat across from them in the same spot where I had once watched my sister read my journal out loud. I told myself I was not that girl anymore. Then I opened my mouth and started talking. I laid out the affair with no sugarcoating. The trips, the messages, the hotel receipts, the confession. I told them I had left the house. I told them I was done. My father kept shaking his head at random points like that would make the story change. When I said my sister's name, he actually laughed once, this short, disbelieving sound, and said there was no way. My mother shut that down real fast. She reminded him, right there in front of me, of the lighter, the cereal, the stolen money, all the times he had chosen not to see who his younger daughter really was. Then she looked at me and asked what I wanted to do. I told her I wanted proof that my father could hear something terrible about his favorite, and not immediately turn on me. I told her I wanted them to hear my sister in her own words. That is when we came up with the plan. My mother suggested we call my sister on speaker and confront her with a fake story first. Something like, "I heard a rumor, is it true?" So we could see how she reacted. I agreed, on the condition that they did not jump in until I gave some kind of sign. My father muttered about drama, but even he was curious, which I hate admitting. We put the phone in the middle of the coffee table. My mother hit the button, and my sister's name flashed on the screen. She answered sounding annoyed, like we had interrupted something important. I started with small talk for about 30 seconds, just enough to throw her off, and then I said, "So, weird question. Someone told me you have been hanging out a lot with my husband. Anything you want to say?" My voice shook, but I kept going. She went straight into performance. Shock, outrage, wounded innocence. She acted like she had no idea what I was talking about, said she barely saw him except at family things, accused me of being paranoid and jealous. It was textbook. I let her ramble for a bit, let her dig the hole, and then I told her he had already confessed everything. I mentioned dates, places, the hotel. There was this little hitch in her voice that gave her away. Then the real her came out. She dropped the sweet tone like a mask sliding off and said, "Well, if you already know, what do you want me to say? He came to me. He said you were cold and always nagging. Maybe if you had taken care of him, he would not have needed someone else." I could feel my mother stiffen next to me. My father's face went blank. My sister kept going, because of course she did. Once she realized she had been caught, she turned cruel. She said things about how he deserved better, about how she was younger and more fun, about how he told her things he could never tell me. At one point, she actually laughed and said, "You know they always liked me more anyway. No one is going to take your side on this." That is when my mother leaned forward and told her, very calmly, that she and my father were both listening. You could hear the silence on the line. For several seconds, my sister did not say anything. Then she started stuttering, trying to backtrack, claiming she had been joking, that she had misunderstood the questions, that she never meant any of it. She tried to blame the whole thing on my husband, saying he had manipulated her, that she had been vulnerable, that she did not know how far it had gone. My mother did not raise her voice. She did not have to. She just said, "You betrayed your sister. Again. And you did it with her husband. Do you have any idea what you have done?" My sister cried, loud, dramatic sobbing. It sounded fake even through the speaker. My father finally spoke. He did not yell. He did not defend her. He asked one question. How long? When she said the number of years, he put his head in his hands. My mother told her they would talk later and hung up. For once, she did not rush to comfort the crying child on the other end. After that call, things moved both too fast and not fast enough. My mother told me she was done pretending things were fine. She apologized again, not just for this, but for years of letting my sister run wild while I took the hits. She said she could not undo the past, but she could make different choices going forward. My father tried to speak to me alone afterward, saying he felt like he had failed as a parent. I did not disagree. I told him I needed him to support me in what came next, not just with words, but with actions. He nodded, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. Loving someone does not switch off because they did something unforgivable. I knew that better than anyone. I went back to the hotel, picked up my daughter from a friend who had watched her for the day, and started looking up lawyers. I did not have some fancy team waiting in the wings. I had a search engine and a list of local offices with middling websites. I called the one my mother's coworker recommended, explained the basic situation, and set up a consultation. The lawyer I met with was blunt in a way I appreciated. She told me adultery happens all the time, that the court cares more about what is best for the child than who slept with whom, but that the long-term affair and his attempts to shift blame could still matter in negotiations. She suggested a paternity test, not because there was any real doubt, but because he had thrown that accusation at me and she wanted to shut it down officially. I agreed, partly out of anger, partly out of grim practicality. If he wanted to play that game, fine. We would put it on paper. She also told me to start documenting everything. Messages, calls, any attempts at intimidation or manipulation. Not in some dramatic spy way, just screen captures and notes in a folder. When I told him I had hired a lawyer and that we would be doing a test, he tried so many tactics in such quick succession, it was almost impressive. First, he begged. He cried, said he was scared of losing our daughter, that he would cut my sister off, that he would go to therapy, that he would do anything. When that did not move me, he got angry. He said I was overreacting, that people worked through worse, that I was going to ruin our daughter's life by breaking up the family. When that still did not work, he got cold. He said if I pushed this, he would fight for at least half custody, that he would tell the court I was unstable, that my issues with my family made me unfit. That last one almost got me. Not because I believed it, but because it was such a low blow it stunned me. I told my lawyer. She was not surprised. She had seen that playbook before. She reassured me that nothing in my history made me unfit and that judges have seen far worse. It helped, a little. The test obviously came back showing he was the biological father. He did not even apologize for that particular insult. He just acted like the whole thing had been necessary because of how suspicious I had gotten. I stopped engaging with any conversation that was not directly about our daughter. I told him if he needed to talk logistics, he could message or email me, and that anything else would go unanswered. He hated that boundary. He kept trying to bait me into emotional arguments. But I held the line as best I could. Not perfectly. I definitely had a couple of late-night lapses where I sent paragraphs I later regretted, but I am human. Over the next couple of months, my life turned into calendars, emails, and doing the next right thing even when I felt numb. We ended up doing a mediated agreement instead of a long drawn-out trial. It was cheaper, and I did not have the energy for a full courtroom circus. He got scheduled visitation, some weekends and a weekday dinner, with clear rules about communication and pickups. I got primary physical custody. Child support was calculated off his income, which he tried to downplay until my lawyer pointed out the inconsistencies in his pay stubs and his lifestyle. The cheating did not magically mean he lost everything, unfortunately. Real life is not a revenge movie, but he did not get to walk away untouched either. During all of this, my sister's life was also quietly imploding. My mother, true to her word, cut off her financial support. No more tuition payments, no more rent help, no more automatic deposits for essentials. My sister had been coasting on that safety net for years, treating college like a social event with some classes sprinkled in. Suddenly, she had to actually figure out how to pay for things. She tried crying to my father, of course, telling him my mother was being cruel and picking sides. He tried to sneak her money once, and my mother shut that down with the same steely calm she had used years ago with the lighter. She told him if he wanted to use his own personal cash. She could not stop him, but the shared accounts were no longer going to fund their younger daughter's chaos. It wasn't impulsive, either. My mother had been talking for years about getting everything formalized, and this was the moment she stopped postponing it. Around that time, my parents met with a legal advisor to update their documents. The inheritance that had been a vague background topic my whole life became very real. There was a house, fully paid off, some land my grandparents had left them, and a collection of policies and investments that, all together, added up to a number I had never imagined my family would be attached to. They had always lived relatively modestly, but my mother had been quietly saving for decades. My mother told me, in a calm, almost business-like tone, that she and my father had decided almost all of it would go to me and my daughter, with a small symbolic amount set aside for my sister, so she could not claim she had been forgotten. She said she could not, in good conscience, reward behavior that had hurt so many people, not just me but the entire family. She admitted that part of her had always known my sister was capable of cruelty, but she had hoped that age would bring maturity. Instead, the cruelty had just gotten more elaborate. She knew it might look harsh to people on the outside, but she had watched the pattern for too long to pretend it would magically change. She knew it might sound harsh to outsiders, but she had watched the pattern for too long. My father looked guilty, but he signed. I do not know if it was guilt, love, or exhaustion that pushed the pen. Probably some messy mix of all three. Of course, secrets like that do not stay buried in families. My sister found out about the inheritance change through an aunt who thought she was doing some kind of peacemaking by telling her. Instead, she lit a match and walked away. My phone rang at 9 in the evening on a day when I was already worn out from work and parenting and lawyer emails. I saw my sister's name on the screen and my whole body tensed. I almost did not answer. I wish I had not, but I did. She skipped any kind of greeting and went straight into it. She screamed about how our parents had changed everything, how I had stolen the future she had been counting on, how I had turned them against her. She threw every old insult she could think of, calling me manipulative, pathetic, A victim. Then her voice cracked. And underneath all the rage, I heard something I had not heard in her before. Fear. Real, raw fear about money, about stability, about being truly on her own for the first time. She said she was struggling, that she had had to drop out of school for a semester, that she was working a retail job with a schedule that changed every week. She said her friends had stopped inviting her places as much, that some of our cousins were avoiding her. My aunt apparently had not kept the affair news to herself. It had traveled through the extended family like gossip always does, morphing and growing, but never straying too far from the ugly truth at its core. There was a split second where my old instincts almost kicked in, where I almost softened. Then I remembered standing in the hallway as a teenager, hearing her tell me the world would be better if I disappeared. I remembered the lighter, the stolen money, the journal, the way she had smirked at my wedding, the way she had laughed about being more desirable than me on that phone call with my parents listening. I remembered sitting in a cheap hotel room, holding my sleeping daughter and wondering how I was going to reassemble our lives. So I did not comfort her. I told her very calmly that for as long as I could remember, she had treated me like a punching bag, that she had cheered when other people hurt me, that she had stolen from me, lied about me, and then escalated it into sleeping with my husband. I told her this was not one mistake. It was the peak of a mountain she had been climbing since we were kids. I told her that if she was finally facing consequences, that was between her and the mirror. Not me. She called me cruel. She said I was abandoning her. I told her I was choosing myself and my daughter for the first time. I told her that did not make me cruel. It made me done. Then I hung up. She texted a stream of messages after that, some begging, some threatening, some saying she hoped I would regret this one day. I blocked her number. My hands were shaking, but I did not unblock her. Not that night. Not any night after. Life did not magically get easy after all of this. If anything, it got messier. My daughter was confused and heard about the new schedule, about why her father did not wake up in the same house anymore. I tried to answer her questions in age-appropriate ways, telling her that sometimes adults make choices that mean they cannot live together, but that both of us loved her. I refused to badmouth him in front of her, even when every cell in my body wanted to. She would figure out who he was on her own one day. She did not need my commentary speeding that along. Work became both a distraction and a stressor. I threw myself into my job, staying late, taking on extra projects, partly because the additional income helped, partly because it was one area of my life where things made sense. Do the work, get paid, show up, be recognized. There were no secret affairs hidden in the copy machine, at least not in my department. My boss noticed the extra effort and offered me a promotion after a while, which was both flattering and terrifying. I took it. It helped stabilize our financial situation in a way that felt like a life raft. My relationship with my mother changed too. We had some brutal conversations about the past, about all the times she had leaned on me as the responsible one, while my sister ran wild. She cried a lot during those talks. I did too. There's no clean way to unpack decades of hurt. But we did the work, slowly. She stopped making excuses for my sister, even in small ways. She stopped referring to what happened as all of that stuff and started naming it. Betrayal, affair, abuse. It mattered, hearing an adult in my family use those words. My father, well, he tried. He called more. He asked about my day. He actually listened. He told me he loved me more times in the year after my marriage blew up than he had in the 10 years before. But he also slipped. I found out once that he had met my sister for lunch without telling my mother, that he had given her some cash because she was behind on rent. When my mother confronted him, they had one of the worst fights I have ever seen. He came to my apartment the next day looking like someone had aged him 5 years overnight and told me he did not know how to be a father to just one daughter. I told him he did not have to choose. He just had to stop pretending nothing had happened. As for my ex and my sister, they ended up exactly where people like them often do, stuck together by the consequences of their own choices. When my sister lost the financial safety net from my parents, and when my ex realized that child support plus his own bills left him with less spending money than he liked, they decided the smart thing would be to move in together. They got a small place in a less expensive part of town, shared rent, combined what was left of their money. I know this not because I stalk them. I blocked both of them on every app I had, but because people talk. My cousins talk, my aunt talks. Even my father, when he forgets himself, slips up and mentions something he heard from over there. Apparently, their life is not the glamorous, passionate story they told themselves it would be when they were sneaking around behind my back. Shocking, I know. They fight a lot. He resents her for being part of the fallout with our daughter. She resents him for not being able to give her the lifestyle she thought she was signing up for when she chose a married man over literally anyone else in the world. They are both broke, both angry, both trapped in a little apartment that smells like frustration. Sometimes, when I am driving past that side of town on my way somewhere else, I think about that apartment. I imagine the arguments, the slammed doors, the silent dinners. I imagine my sister looking at the walls and realizing this is what she burned her family for. A small, dim space with a man who has already proven he will betray the person he lives with for years if he gets bored enough. I do not feel sorry for her. I do not feel sorry for him. I feel distant. Like I am watching a show I used to be a character in from the outside. It has been a little over a year now since that Tuesday night with the receipts on the table. My life is not some fairy tale. I am not healed. I still have nights where I wake up sweating because I dreamed I was back in that hallway with the lighter, or in my kitchen with the hotel bills, or on the phone hearing my sister laugh about being the favorite. I still flinch a little when my phone rings with an unknown number. I still avoid certain songs and shows that remind me of pieces of my old life. But there are good things too. My daughter and I have our own little routines now. Movie nights on the couch with popcorn in a big metal bowl. Saturday mornings where we make lopsided pancakes together and end up covered in flour. Walks in the park where she chatters about school and friends and the latest things she has learned. She asks questions about the future, about whether I will ever get married again, and I tell her the truth. I do not know. Right now, I am more focused on making sure she grows up in a house where her feelings are heard and her boundaries are respected. That is my bare minimum. I started going to therapy regularly, not just crisis sessions. It is weird and uncomfortable, and sometimes I leave feeling like my brain has been scraped raw, but it is helping. I am slowly untangling the voice in my head that sounds like my sister from the one that sounds like me. I am learning how to set boundaries without apologizing 10 times. I am learning that I am allowed to be angry, that being angry does not make me the villain. I also joined a support group for people who have been betrayed by someone close, and it was humbling in the weirdest way. I expected horror stories that would make mine feel smaller. Instead, I found ordinary people with the same exhausted eyes, saying out loud the thoughts I thought were uniquely mine, that you can miss the version of someone that never really existed. That betrayal doesn't just break trust in them, it messes with your trust in your own memory. Some nights I'd leave those meetings feeling lighter, and some nights I'd leave raw, like I'd peeled off a scab. But it gave me language for what happened. And it reminded me I wasn't crazy for still being affected even after I made the right decisions. Anyway, if you want to know how it actually feels now that all the explosions are over, it is not some cinematic glow-up where I float around being healed and wise all the time. Most days are just boring in the best way. School lunches to pack, laundry that somehow never ends, emails to answer, random dance parties in the kitchen when a song my daughter likes comes on the radio. There are still nights when I sit on the edge of my bed and my brain replays old scenes on a loop, and I have to remind myself out loud that they are memories, not warnings. I still get annoyed at my parents, still second-guess myself in new friendships, still flinch a little when someone raises their voice in the next aisle at the store. But underneath all of that noise, there is this quiet, stubborn thing growing that I barely recognize as mine, a kind of trust in myself. I know now that I will never again beg to be chosen by people who only love the version of me that does not take up space. I would rather be alone in my small, cluttered place with my kid and our lopsided pancakes than back in any room where I have to disappear to keep the peace. It is not perfect. It is not glamorous. It is just honest. And for the first time in my life, that actually feels like enough.